So about a year and a half ago, in a global board meeting, I won't forget this, and I'm trying to think if there's any board members here so I can say this. It was a global board meeting, and the board said, geez, Greg, well, we were talking about something else, and somebody changed the topic a little bit, and they said, we want to understand how do we explain to the CFO the value of marketing. Now, my inside voice at the time was, what do you mean you don't know how to talk to the CFO? I was a little taken back by the comment. And what I came to understand, which made a lot of sense as we sort of explored it more in the board meeting, was the point was, they go, we all need to be consistent in how marketers and CMOs talk to CFOs. That if there's an industry standard by which we would communicate commonly, that is either the CMO or CFO moves companies or the business change, that there would be a common way of doing that. And I got to tell you, a project like that for the MMA, we just get super excited to go figure out what, in essence, we think people haven't really figured out yet. So what you're going to see today is a presentation by a gentleman named Rex Briggs, who, as I may have mentioned if you've been in other sessions with me, probably one of the smartest marketing measurement inventors in the world in the last couple of decades. Rex developed the methodology that is multi-touch attribution. I know I was there. He did it for me when I ran the IB, and then I popularized that methodology as he continued to evolve it, built a company, and then sold that company. So Rex is going to walk you through what has been a 2-year project. We're about a year plus into it, about where he's thinking the answer lies. So we'd love to have your feedback on how you think we need to explain marketing and its implications in a way that the CFO is going to appreciate. So we're open to feedback. We hope to unveil and somewhat finalize this work in the next plan of it at MMA CEO CMO Summit, which is in July at the end of Napa. It's an invite only, but if you write me, I will see what we can do to get you into that, okay? So with that, if you could give a big possible welcome, because this is absolutely in the realm of possible, Rex Briggs. Thanks, everyone.
So this is a presentation about the challenges that we have of getting CMOs and CFOs to align. And I'm going to start off with saying that I saw the person who really originated some of this conversation last night in the elevator. I'll tell you that story in a moment. But first, how many of you have a marketing budget that you're responsible for? And how many of you have ever had finance come to you around the end of the quarter and take some of that budget? Almost everyone. And that was a nervous laugh. That wasn't saying, you know, this is a good thing. Yeah, I think almost everyone has had that experience. And in fact, I want to make the theme of today's presentation marketing, not carpeting. Now, I don't mean that figuratively, as in finance walks all over marketing and takes their budget at the end of the quarter. I mean that quite literally, as in one of the people who is a member of MMA, an SVP title, responsible for the marketing budget, lost $100 million to carpeting. They took away the budget and they carpeted some of their branch locations instead. And I think that the reason had a lot to do with the fact that they had a better story and understanding about that investment and the return than at the time that that organization had for their own marketing budget. So again, marketing, not carpeting, is a literal statement here, and the problem is that what oftentimes happens, finance doesn't always see marketing as an investment. And marketing doesn't always help finance to see us as an investment because we don't know the finance metrics that they care about. We don't speak the language that they focus on. And as a result, we get an outcome where we may have our budget taken. Now, I want you to come away from this presentation understanding the language and the mindset of finance and to have the tools to be able to have a conversation that allows you to build that understanding of marketing as an investment. And yeah, there still might be cases where the budget does go away at the end of the quarter because they need to make the numbers to make the stock price stay where it needs to stay. But at least you'll now understand what that give and take is about, and you'll have a really strong basis to talk the week after that happens to say, well, we need to put money back in to offset what we just did. And this should give you those tools to do that. So let me give you some facts, though. In a survey of over 300 US marketing leaders, the #1 issue was demonstrating the impact of marketing outcomes on financial outcomes. So if we take a marketing action and we see an outcome, everyone's asking for that, and yet 65% of marketers will tell you that they do not use an integrated marketing team where marketing and finance sit together and work hand in glove. And 50% of marketers will tell you that they have been pushed by non-marketing people to focus on the short-term results, the leads today, the conversions today. And in fact, I want to think about all the conversations and surveys that we've done over the last year and a half. We've done an extensive amount of work in this area. We think we're close to understanding what the roadmap is for how you get to a better relationship. And as Greg said, stay tuned for that at the CEO CMO Summit. What I will draw from, though, is 4 questions that come from some of my observations from some of this work with the CMOs and CFOs. So I want you to take a quiz with me. The first question of 4 is, which is going to return a better amount of conversions today, have a higher ROI? Is that focusing on 1,000 of your current customers, A, or B, 1,000 people that have never purchased from you before? How many of you say A? Yeah, A is the answer that is typically true. We see a difference between 5 to 10 times more expensive or lower ROI to go after someone who isn't a customer compared to someone who is a customer. Second question out of the 4, which will lead to more purchases today? A, a brand message with a deal offer, or B, a brand message without a deal offer? How many of you say, put cash on the hood if you want to sell that car? A? Yeah, everyone has got that one right. Okay, and the third question here is, what's going to generate more conversions today? Lower funnel advertisement, such as in paid search or when someone's just about to buy, or an upper funnel advertisement, such as in linear TV or sponsorship. How many people say A? This is a little tougher one, but yeah, that usually does convert more. Now here's the problem. All of those push you towards a short-term ROI, and so the fourth and final question is, how many of you have 3% or lower churn? Now, almost no one's hand is going to go up for this. One person, congratulations. But most people don't. And so the issue is all of our reporting, all of the ROI that you measure where you have in-campaign plus maybe a 7-day look back, that's pushing towards a short-term ROI that's leading you to make the wrong ultimate long-term choices, leading you to fall into what we call the short-term ROI trap. So I am a big advocate of using ROI for analysis, but it has to ladder into a larger strategy that connects marketing as an investment. It has to connect into an idea that is going to help you have that conversation with finance that helps them see that even though you might see a higher ROI in this report, that is not always the best strategy for achieving your long-term objectives and goals. So if we come back to some of the research that we've done, 63% of the CMOs and marketing people that we interviewed as part of this process showed us that what they were measuring was short-term ROI. They were not measuring long-term at all. In fact, when we looked at what metrics they were using to measure, almost a third of them, 1 out of 3, the primary basis of their measurement was simply counting or the last touch or some rules and judgment. They didn't actually have a long-term measurement framework. Now, some people did have LTV measurement, and that is where I want you to go towards. LTV, lifetime value, that is a longer frame of reference for you to be able to talk about the investment to a CFO. Now, some of the research that MMA Global has been doing related to brand's performance, and I see my friend Vas in the front. If you want to talk more about that, talk to Vas. That research is helping understand the long-term value. And oftentimes, we've been given a rule of thumb of maybe it's 2 to 1. And what we heard at this conference here is, in fact, that number is far too low. It can be as high as maybe 5 to 1, according to some of the research that Kroger shared. And the work that Ally did last year showed that not only was there a longer-term benefit, but if you focused on the short-term ROI strategy, it would look like you were coming out ahead with 57,000 more accounts opened, but that was not the winning strategy. By the end of year 2, you would see 40,000 lower accounts if you stuck with that short-term strategy. You would have come out worse. You would not have gotten the investment and the return. And that's why it's so important to balance your short-term ROI with an understanding of how it connects to longer-term value creation. So the first finding is that marketing needs longer-term KPIs and analytics. The second point that I'll do to unpack that is that I had spent a lot of time looking at different sliders or ways that you can conceptualize this. This chart here shows looking at profiles between existing customers and new customers. And there's a balance where you do need that short-term ROI and that value creation, but you also want to be doing longer-term value creation. And so it's about finding that right balance given your specific business strategy at this point in time. Now, you might also look at questions about the funnel, whether you have that deal-oriented message or the brand-oriented message, again, as a slider, depending on what are your short and longer-term needs, and ultimately the journey, how you use your media mix for both lower funnel and upper funnel, and what that right balance is. And those sliders will depend on your specific brand, your competitive context, what you're trying to achieve, what the CEO is trying to achieve, and how you align with finance. But here's the catch. This is something that we can calculate if we have person-level analytics, but many people are still using things like marketing mix models, which don't have any of this data in there. They have a sort of a rough notion of long-term, but if you're not doing it at a person level and making these type of trade-offs in that slider view, then you're probably doing it wrong. So when we talked to different CMOs, again, what we found was that 67% don't have a LTV measure that the CFO agrees with, or they don't have one at all. 67% of the top marketers. So this is something that we need to make a priority, and I'm going to show you some of the tools so that you can build your own LTV model and begin to move on that journey. Now, some people did say that they did have an LTV model, and my BS meter is to then follow up with the question of, okay, what's your LTV to CAC ratio? Now, this is a very standard question that every CFO knows, but 87% of the people that we interviewed, members of MMA, didn't have an answer to that question. We're going to unpack that a little bit later because that's an important one to know. But finding number 2 is that marketing needs to learn the finance metrics and the ratios. So I want to ask you, put your hand up if you know all of these terms: DCF, NPV, LTV, CAC, EBITDA, GM, and EV. Every single one of those? Good. A couple of people. Talk to those people that raised their hands. But if you don't know them, these are the terminology of finance. It's discount cash flows, net present value, lifetime value, cost of acquisition, earnings before income tax and depreciation, gross margin, and enterprise value. These are the terms that are fluid in the finance department. They know them well, and they think in these terms. And if we want to be effective with finance, we need to learn these terms and be able to translate the way we talk about marketing metrics to these terms. So for example, we talk about brand love, favorability, incremental sales, net promoter scores, a lifetime value, and those are good, solid metrics, and they're important, but we need to map them over to finance, where they're talking about revenue growth and EBITDA and stock return and LTV to CAC and enterprise value. So let me ask you this. What is a one number on there on the finance side that will determine whether they come for your budget at the end of the quarter? The higher it is, the more likely they are to come for your budget. Anyone know? It's the EBITDA number. And the reason is because EBITDA, you can take the multiple of EBITDA for your category, and you can understand how valuable your budget is to finance at the end of the quarter to make Wall Street happy enough with the performance. So in the automotive industry, for example, the EBITDA ratio is somewhere around 8 to 10, depending on what company you're looking at. And what that means is that if they take $1 million of your budget, it's worth $10 million in enterprise value. Now, the problem with that is that if they take your budget and they put it right down to enterprise value, most CFOs understand that there's probably some trade-off. There's a reason why marketing is there. They probably do some good. And it might be a little bit like saying, well, they could also sell off their factories and not make anything and take that money straight to the bottom line and get 10 to 1 multiple off of that. But they know that's a bad idea, because if you sell off your factory, then you don't have anything to make in the next quarter. You don't have a business in the future. And what we want you to have is the same tools to understand that investment trade-off and what you're trading off in taking that dollars and how you are effectively selling off one of your factories so you don't have as much productive capacity anymore to create demand for your product. And if you can connect that with finance to understand that logic, then they may still take your budget because yours is more flexible and they can turn that into bottom line EBIT, but a lot faster than trying to do a fire sale on their factories. But at least now you have a basis to get that budget back and you understand the trade-off and the balance. So the key thing is LTV is how a CFO figures out your ROI and your long-term investment value. It is, specifically, they oftentimes look at the LTV to CAC ratio, which is the cost of acquisition. And what they want to see is they want to see roughly a 3-to-1 ratio. The idea is that for every dollar that you spend in marketing, you should be creating $3 worth of this lifetime value. And lifetime value is basically a discounted cash flow of what the stream of revenue that you're generating from that new customer is worth. And that discount is based upon that risk that they're associating with it and the cost of capital. So I was just doing this with Shell, who will have some great AI personalization research to share at the CEO CMO Summit. And their goal was to get people to download their loyalty program, because what they have observed from their own data is that if you have the loyalty program, you are about twice as likely to fuel up with their gas instead of somebody else's. And when you look at the value of how much a person spends, you can say, okay, well that's worth, and I'm going to make up a number. Let's say it's worth $100. So if I look at my 3 years, it's not quite worth $300. It's worth some discount for that future value. And I can put a number on that, and I can now associate with the value of spending more to get an existing customer compared to spending on an existing customer who already uses the card. So getting that new customer can now be tied into an LTV. We can look at the cost associated with it. We can look at the cost of maintaining it, and we can make that bridge of how that investment pays off. So the other thing that CFOs will oftentimes look at is a contribution margin, which is the revenue less the variable costs. It's another ways that the CFO weighs your value. And to quote Ron Codd, a CFO and board of director on 20 different boards, he said, theoretically, as long as contribution margin is greater than the incremental marketing costs per unit sold, you should invest in more advertising as long as there's available market demand. He is telling you basically the script of what you need to bring to him to be able to fund marketing as an investment. So let me unpack LTV a little bit more. There's a few different ways of using LTV. And this is one of the curves for a 7-year period of time for this company. And it's actually not that difficult to calculate LTV. You need to have a customer file and know at a customer level how much they spent with you this year, how much they spent with you last year, the year before, and to trace that back. And what you want to calculate is you want to basically calculate how many of people have churned, so are no longer spending with you this year, but they were spending with you last year. And you might want to look at your customer retention and revenue retention. There's different ways that you can look at that churn dimension. The second part is you want to look at how many people are spending with you less this year compared to last year. Those are downsells. And how many people on the positive side are spending more with you this year compared to last year. That's your upsells. And of course, you have the new customer additions. That's the fundamentals. It's not more complicated than that. But what you can do with that as a core baseline is you can figure out at what point do half of your customers churn. That's your half-life. That allows you to calculate your lifetime value. And you can look at the stream of revenue over that period of time, discount it based upon the cost of capital, and that's your LTV metric. We will, as MMA, help you do that if you would like. There are consultancies that will help you do that as well. Strategically, here's why it's important, though. If once you have that baseline knowledge, you can ask the question of, can you change LTV? How do you improve that LTV? Can you reduce churn? Can you do win-backs and get people who have left to come back to your brand? Can you increase your upsells? What is the contribution of your paid, owned, and earned media to that lifetime value, to your upsells, to reducing churn? And ultimately, you can ask questions like, how will AI increase my productivity? Can I do all of that with a lower CAC, with lower cost? Or can I do it more efficiently or faster, at better scale? That's fundamentally the key question that you want to ask. Now, lifetime value has an interesting concept, and I'm going to digress a little bit with a chart that I showed Vas last night. I showed him a chart. We were talking about, I don't know how we got on this topic, we were talking about life expectancy or how long you live. And so I'm a data geek, so I converted my family tree into the birth and death date so I could see the age of how long people lived for the last 400 years. Why not? My family goes back to the second landing at Jamestown, so we have a long history in the United States with pretty decent data. And you can definitely see that life expectancy increases, especially after 1936, when pretty much the last, at least the Briggs family's infant mortality was sort of behind us. But there is an outlier, which is my biological father and his brother. He died at 58, and his brother died at 68. And the reason is, again, if you look at the LTV, they're outliers. They're not performing as well. They would be the effectiveness of your churn. But the key question isn't so much what that data point is what can you do about it? And in my case, it traces back to heart disease. And how many of you know that Lp(a), the genetic variation that 1 in 5 of you have? A couple of you? Okay, so if you look to your left, look to your right, look behind you and in front of you, one of you has Lp(a). And it is when it's combined with smoking, even if you've quit, is a huge risk marker for heart disease and early death. Now, the good news is in our generation, we have medications like Repatha that can make a huge difference. That's what I'm taking. And coming out soon from Novartis, I don't know if Gail's around here, but they've got this phenomenal drug, pelacarsen, which is going to be a complete game changer. And for my kids, because it's genetic, that's something that we tested. So if I'm thinking about how do I extend my lifetime value or my lifetime of my kids, then the key thing is the intervention of what I can do differently that could make a difference in that life expectancy. Now, the marketing equivalent is probably asking the question of who is churning prematurely from your brand? How do you engage them? How do you give them some offer or some inducement to keep them around? And that is your job as a marketer, is to figure out how do you bend that curve of lifetime value. You can also look at the overperformers and begin to study the people. So we have some people in my family who have lived to be past 100 years old. What were they doing right? Is it just genetics, or was there some clean living going on there that we can all learn from? We had someone in 1960 at 38 die, very young, right? Shooting accident, okay, that hunting, maybe that's a bad idea. So you can begin to make choices that can extend your lifetime. As a marketer, my specific part is I'm going to share a couple of case studies of how this is applied. In this particular case, when we began to do the measurement, there were 2 different strategies that these different companies were applying. Strategy 1 was a land and expand. The other was kind of going big but not really growing the account very much. Initially, it looked like there was 5.4 higher return on investment from that short-term strategy. But in the long run, in fact, it turns out that it's worth 2.1 less. So you get, for every dollar you're spending, you're getting $2.10 more with that strategy that's on the red line that looks like it starts slower. The challenge, though, is you have to wait until the break-even point of 3.7 years. So as a marketer, if you analyzed your data and you saw this strategy, what could you do to, number one, make sure that you were covering that land and expand strategy, because ultimately that's actually a better investment in this category. And the answer is you can't really wait for 3 years to get the answers back from your research. Now, I will say that the number one implication here is that you should make sure that you have cohorts in your data set as you're doing marketing, so you can begin to look at different strategies over time and see how they play out. That's how you get data like this. But number 2 is you have to have a leading indicator that begins to tell you what the likely performance is going to be now, so that you don't have to wait for 3.7 years to get the answer. So a leading indicator can be things like what Vasilis shared with brand as performance, like brand favorability, a brand I love, and so forth. If you are doing person-level data and you have brand tracking data, you can oftentimes match that data back to your CRM file and look how that might change over time and might be a good leading indicator or predictor so that you can begin to make better choices sooner. Now, Amex did this in some of their credit card business, and what they found was that if they offered you their card with a key benefit of it, that would oftentimes be more valuable, and that would show up as being more valuable somewhere around the end of year 1 to the beginning of year 2. But in the short term, whenever they offered you cash or points for your airlines, they would get a higher return, but those people oftentimes wouldn't use the card, and so they wouldn't be as profitable. And so they began to look at metrics that would give them a better idea of where you'd be a year from now or 2 years from now, because they want that annuity of the investment. They don't want the sugar high of the short-term investment. And so their leading indicators help them make that better decision. And you can get your CFO more bought into those leading indicators to understand how your marketing programs are generating value, even if in the short term they might not have as high of an ROI today, because they're doing a better job of attracting new customers, or they're doing a better job of bringing customers in without requiring a deal. So here's a second case study, and then I will come back to some key points. This case study was a CMO who looked at this market they were in and said, well, we're growing pretty nicely, but I think we're actually talking to the wrong customers. I think we're in the wrong marketing segment. It's a highly competitive segment. It was a red ocean situation, and the margins were pressed down as a result. And so the yellow line is their gross margins, which CFOs care very much about. They would much rather have a much higher gross margin. And so the theory actually played out as the pandemic and so forth set in when their business crashed. The second epic here is shown with the market dropping down. And as you analyze the data, we could see that there was a diamond in the rough. About 10% of their business had really great dynamics. It was not in a highly competitive area. It had much higher profit margins. And so they doubled down and focused in on that area. And here's where they are today. Much bigger growth and a much higher gross margin. This business is literally not just twice as valuable because their revenue is higher, they are 20 times more valuable because they changed the dynamic of their business to focus in a gross margin area that was much, much more attractive. So key takeaways is strategically, you as a CMO should be asking, are we in the right market in the longer run? And do we need to pivot or change? And are we attracting the right type of customers? And do we need to pivot or change? And if you have that mindset in the orientation as you're looking at LTV, lifetime value, not as your tombstone, but as your opportunity to make adjustments and improve the LTV, now you have the key mindset to connect with the finance mindset and make a difference. So let's talk about the finance mindset. One of the members of MMA Global, he pointed out to us that a lot of times we talk about branding and customer experience, and that is not the language that finance thinks in. It's not finance's love language to think in terms of branding. Their love language, he adjusted how he talked to them by using the term, instead of branding experience, he used the term maximum multi-year returns. Now that's the love language of a finance person. And that actually helped bridge the same concepts and same ideas, but in a way that really connected with finance in a way that they understood what to do with that. So I want you to think about the CEO and CFO's pressure, because they live and die by their stock price. And that's why they may come to you at the end of the quarter to take dollars to make sure if there's a little bit of a gap in their EBITDA that they still cover that spread. But if they understand you as an investment, then again, you are in that right situation where you are in a good position to get that money back, or for them maybe not to take that money in the first place. So what Ron Codd said was a really key point. He said, recurring revenue is highly valued by the street. Customer acquisition cost and customer LTV are critical metrics in this day and age. So if you're connecting with a CFO on those terms and talking about maximum multi-year returns and how your branding and customer experience are delivering that annuity, and you're showing how you are strategically making decisions that are increasing your LTV by reducing churn and increasing acquisition in a strategic way, and you're not getting trapped in the short-term ROI chase from your dashboards and your reporting, I think you have a really solid foundation for a different kind of relationship. So what are the next steps on your journey? Well, I think you absolutely need to have the key measurement pieces covered. Counting, as we saw about a third of the business doing and using just judgment, really isn't enough. You need an LTV framework. You need multi-touch attribution. You may need MMM to be able to look at the external factors and how they play into your market. And I definitely think that the next level after that is brand as performance and a relationship with that, red planet Mars where the CFOs come from. And I think you need to have them sitting in your team and integrated and really helping you bridge this. How do we look at the long term? How do we make sure we're making the right investment decision for the long term and not being tricked by the short term? And the reason why that foundation is so important is because the next block coming to the stack is AI. Now, AI is such an important dimension because it will optimize incredibly efficiently, and if you are using the wrong metric, like short-term returns, then you may be optimizing yourself into not a very attractive business. So my final takeaways that I'll give you are 5 points. Number one is ROI is not the be-all, end-all, and it can oftentimes be a short-term trap. You absolutely need to ladder it and connect it into your longer-term strategy and how it drives LTV. Second is that marketers do need these metrics, LTV, MTA, MMM, as foundational. Now, I personally believe that we can come up with an integrated way of having AI work with LTV and MTA and MMM. I'm actually directly working on trying to figure out what that math looks like, how we bring that together, actively with my work with Claritas, where I wear the hat of Chief AI Officer. And I'm doing it because I see what AI can do based upon all the work we've done with CAP. And I know we have to get this right, and we need to get this right now. Point number 3 is LTV is a destination, but you can't wait to see if you get there. You need to have a leading indicator now, today, and some of the best leading indicator work is some of the work that I'm seeing VAST do in brand as performance. I've seen some other good metrics, and I gave you some tips for how you might go about trying to create those leading indicators. And fourth, you can beat the LTV trend. Do not take that as a given. Do not look at, like in my father's case, at his early death because of LP(a) as your destiny. Ask, how can you change that outcome? What can you do to have an intervention that is going to make a difference and give you that longevity of that relationship with your customers? In fact, I think it is the CMO's job to be the strategy to beat that LTV trend. If I were to distill it down, that is the objective and goal. And the fifth and the final point is that CFOs may be from Mars and CMOs may be from Venus, but I do think we can get the planets to align. And that alignment is based upon that relationship. So I encourage you to build it. Thank you.